Welcome to week 3 of child psychopathology. In this week, we're talking about chapter 7 and 8, communication and learning disorders, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I have to tell you about the communication disorders is not necessarily something that seems so psychological, right? We think about like speech and language. However, children who have communication disorders obviously have a difficult time expressing their needs, feeling understood, and that kind of leads to all kinds of difficulties in their self-esteem and some concerns. Here I have this article that I found that is very recent, and it talks that there's a poll. You can see that September of this year. A national poll of audiologists and speech and language pathologists revealed an increase in child medical referrals for parental concerns about hearing, speech, and language delays. And so they actually, they're observing an increase in child communication disorders. So this is something that we need to be aware of. And look at this, the 43% of the people who were polled here actually observe this in schools. So children definitely are in need of some attention there. Chapter 7 also talks about communication disorders. And when we're looking at the effects of being diagnosed with a learning disability on children's self-esteem, here is an article that you are discussing that talks about the impact of a learning disability on children's self-esteem. Actually, there is an article that I found that also talks about the impact of a specific learning disability on mental health. And children are people with a diagnosed specific learning disorder are 2 to 5 times more likely to have a mental health problem. So this is something of not only educational, but very much also psychological concern. So when we talk about specific learning disorders, these are children who can learn their intelligence, and they have a problem with learning that does not seem to match up with their intelligence. That can be in reading, that can be in written expression, that can be in math, a combination thereof. And so this, of course, also can lead to self-esteem issues and to issues in the family and peer issues, etc. So these are some important issues here. So we are reading also in our abnormal psychology book about attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. And this is, of course, a really hot topic, and in psychology in general. And I would say that if you are a child psychiatrist, so somebody who prescribes medication, or a child psychologist who has the additional education to prescribe medication, this is going to be, especially for child psychiatrists, this is going to be a big issue and a big part of their practice. Right. This gives a little overview here about some of the core characteristics of intention, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and the DSM criteria. Now, what I know from my many, many years and decades of practice is that children who have attention problems and who are overactive, this is part of just about any childhood diagnosis, having attention problems and, acting out or being overactive. So there is a great likelihood or potential for misdiagnosis. Think about anxious children. They're oftentimes wiggly, and they often can't pay attention because if you're anxious, if you ever have taken a test with test anxiety, you realize that you can't concentrate when you're anxious. And if you're thinking about this, people with depression, I've had children in my practice that have taken intelligence tests while they were depressed and while they're not depressed, and there's a huge difference in scores, right? Whatever you're thinking about intelligence tests. But so children with depression oftentimes act out their depression unless they're like more like the internalizer. And that can, so there's a great deal of opportunity for misdiagnosis. So this is something that is a good thing to know about in great detail. So let's take a look at our class. So here we are there are some supplemental materials that are obviously very nice. Our chapter PowerPoints. And then our weekly assignments are diagnosing learning disabilities. That is your discussion board. And then we have your weekly assignment. Now, and the quiz, of course, in Canvas. And again, I recommend you take the quiz first and the readings before you get into the case study, into the discussion board, because that, of course, gives you information to have some thoughtful background in those areas, right? And so when we're looking at the case study here's some of the questions. And I encourage you to notice that there are some discussion questions also on the next page, which has been a little bit of a problem for some of us here to overlook the fact that there's more than one page. So what's the difference, if any, between a child with ADHD and one who's overly rambunctious for his age, right? So 50% of children who are in early childhood could probably be properly diagnosed as ADHD with their attention and activity. So then there is, the issue of distinguishing ADHD, conduct disorder, mild intellectual disability, and learning disorders. And, this is not the question that you have to answer, but in my mind also, stressful environment, anxiety, and all that kind of thing. So ADHD, conduct disorder, mild intellectual disability, and learning disorders is something for you to discuss here in the discussion questions. Is ADHD overdiagnosed, or is it just simply prevalent? Is it 3 to 4 times? It's 3 to 4 times more common in boys than girls. Is there a real difference, you think? What's the best way to assess a child with ADHD? And what role the medical establishment should play? And then there's the request to develop a treatment plan for a child with ADHD whose teacher does not wish to participate. So there's oftentimes also a great deal of pressure on parents to medicate a child with ADHD, which there are a lot of interventions for a child with ADHD that are not medically based. I'm not against the medication, but some parents are. And then sometimes the schools feel there's no help available, but, obviously there's all kinds of interventions. So I hope you have a positive experience with this chapter. Very important areas if you're working with children. And as always, I'm very happy to help you out, and contact me with any questions.